It's a very calming sound. From stones I found in a creek, no less. Okay. That was from yesterday. Funny. Funny. There is lovely meteor shower about us. A very make-a-wish kind of vibe that sits in the air. So even if it feels far-fetched, I bid you to make a wish. I beg you, make a wish and surprise yourself. But not just that. There is potential for visibility of Venus and Jupiter illuminated by the moon, illuminated by the sun, really. What's up? So not just a meteor shower above us that we may make a wish upon, but there is possibility for visible planets, or some of the brightest stars in the sky. And so since Venus and Jupiter are so close together, I thought, why not see what they've got to say to each other and to us? But interestingly enough, they are not the only ones with something to say. In fact, Mercury may be out of retrograde, hurrah, but Neptune and Saturn persist in their retrogrades, with Pluto and Eris as well. And in that, they very much have their own plans about it and about things. Venus and Jupiter are very fun, although it can feel like I want to see like romance. I want to see longevity and stability and like a tall, dark, and handsome kind of figure. But at the same time, that can be very tormenting, towering, and dictator-like. So it's an interesting conjunction. It's an interesting shadow in the night, which can very much be that on a macro as well as a microscopic level, with perhaps skeletons in our own closets. And as foreboding and ominous as that sounds, perhaps it's just things that we've been holding on to that we're seeing is more difficult to hold on to than it is to let it go. And that's also because we're re-navigating comfort in the world, and that is not something we really know how it looks. If you consider capitalism is about consumption, and consumption isn't really ever about stability or satisfaction. It's always about insatiable desire, really. And so it's interesting, when we want comfort in it, as we want comfort to be given to us by a system that is very literally not designed for comfort, not designed to have ever given us that. It's very literally been marketed toward the opposite. And so I think it's a time where we become very clear about those desires, their usefulness, and their need and what that really means to us. Does that make sense? Oh, somebody's bored and doesn't have a friend or a unique username. Um, let's see. Neptune and Saturn also lend themselves very much to that, to the shadow in the room, to the elephant in the room, to uh, the stones at the bottom of our bags, or drop tobacco if you're me. Because I think it's more so about maybe the way we've been sleeping, maybe the dreams we've been having, nightmares we've been having. Um, because Saturn's not superficial per se, but it's a little more hot to the touch than a Neptune is or would be. Um, it's very much small lessons and small steps, but influencing great leaps. And so I think that uncovers something like a root cause or an inner stillness and inner coolness that exists underneath the frustration or exists underneath more fricative states than the stillness that exists deeply beneath the water. Which is interesting too, because they're also very conjunct and on a line of Pisces and Aries, which is very much that space in between coolness and heat. But when you are in the middle of the two, are you lukewarm and uninspired, unmotivated? Or are you overheated like boiling water and agitated and generally activated? Because both are sort of traumatic responses from the nervous system. And I think can feel a lot like mania or depression, which is interesting, which is very interesting. And I guess I've noticed that in the world for sure, and feel it to some degree as well. But I think I've generally got a lot more of a grasp around my own mania and otherwise. What's up, party on? Thanks to that, homie. So we're gonna pull some cards to see what is going to come. What else did I not say? Let's see. Venus and Jupiter in Cancer of all things. With the meteor shower is very much luck and very much wishes and very much good things, but it is again kind of a towering control, crimes of passion. All things that I talked about in the last moon reading. If you are not on my YouTube, then please go jam out over there. But we are here. We are here to see what this planet's alignment and overlay has to offer to us. Yes, we're here to see. So, if you're with me and you're along for the ride and you're not just, I don't know what some people are talking about, then you may join me in taking 3 deep breaths as we tap into the current on the web. You're going to take a deep breath in through your nose, exhale through your mouth, make your body available to the current on the web. Take a deep breath in. And exhale. Take a deep breath in. And exhale. Take a deep breath in. Hmm. What an interesting feeling. Generally unsatisfied for sure. Um, and in a like deep void kind of way. Uh, which is interesting. Venus in Cancer with Jupiter. Um, what what are we wishing for? Do we even know what we want to wish for? What is this void? Justice inverted, Nine of Swords inverted, Ace of Swords upright. Um, I think in a very real way, we know what it is that is dissatisfying about the world around us. Uh, and too often, or more often than not, do we take that on and take that in as ourselves, um, and churn it back out, like very small scale cycles of trauma, um, where we become our external surroundings or circumstances. And it creates a lot of misery, um, in the mind, in the heart, and a lot of hollowness, uh, because of the way we see the world. Um, because of the things that we see in the world, because it's not that we're just perceiving things poorly, because there is, um, a lot of terrible things that happen in the world, that are happening. Uh, there's a lot of uh, cognitive dissonance, let alone violence, let alone psychosis, um, and a lot of injustice, particularly. And it can be quite overwhelming. However, however, bottom of the deck is accurate guess, my friend. 44 millimeters is spot on. Um, 3 points for you. Bottom of the deck is this Nine of Cups. And that is sort of the antithesis of all of this. What a prosperous, what a building, what a growing thing. What a towering thing, what a ionizing thing, what a conductive thing, really. And I think that's the overarching need to see yourself as that. Like, yes, maybe we exist in darkness. Um, Maybe it feels like the world is a miserable, hopeless thing. So what so what keeps you hopeful? So what is your reason? And it doesn't have to be anything outside of yourself or anything, anything that takes your power away. It can be, oh, interesting combination. It can be it can be something in you that also creates inspiration, motivation, and discipline. Really, like the need to show up for yourself in the same way that you would show up for your loved ones or your friends, um, in a very real way. This is wildly deep because in recovery programs they ask you to kind of like release your woes to something bigger than you, and that can take many forms. It ought to really. Unfortunately, because a lot of NA programs are very religiously directed and bound, there are some parameters to what they deem worthy of that. But in a very real way, like whatever it is that ties these things together for you, whether it's the light and the darkness, or being able to build or like uphold goodness for sentient things, whether it's just to be hope in a hopeless time, is in and of itself like a very necessary generative resource. And that's not to say toxic positivity, but that is to say, in a world of possibility, if the worst can happen, then so can the best. In a world of infinite possibility, at the point of any particle collision, yes, sure, the absolute worst is possible, but the absolute best is equally as possible if that is true. It's kind of like yes and the way you kind of compound on like improv if we were to go through life in that way. Rather than what I think we do in conversation, in heavy conversation, is kind of tiptoe around that, and either pathologize, something as intrusive thoughts or anxiety and what have you, or are disdainful about people with a positive outcome, or cynical and sort of held to that in some way. When that comes up, often it's like, okay, let me level with this person. God, and like I feel like this, like dealing with, and dealing feels like a charged word, but like having experienced people that I love close to me that are sick, um, and wanting to meet them where they are and sort of withhold positivity because that's not what they want right now, even if that's where my heart and my mind are, because I want to respect their space. But at the same time, that can, I think, in a very real way, that is also like a disregard for the other, in the same way that we sort of shun the love and light, um, falling into just the skepticism, for sake of skepticism, is just as poorly thought out, is just as half-assed, is just as fragmented as the other. And so this is kind of my like non-toxic positivity balancing, is like, okay, like yes, and like if that's the worst that can happen, cool, what are we going to do then? How are we going to handle it, and try and like turn it around and be, I guess, the problem solver to some degree, but also just the Imagineer. um you know if that's what can happen, then what's the antithesis to that? Maybe you trip and stumble and win the lottery, and everything is perfect and fine. If one is to be believed, then the other must also exist, like quasars existing in different timelines or different spaces, um, which is also its own controversial thought, but is in fact just as true as wave and particle theories coexisting. Um, and exactly that, the capacity to coexist. This Ace of Swords is very much like an intellectual champion. However, um, I think given all of this circumstance, it has more to do with how that's exemplary, how that's exemplified. It's very much akin to like walk the walk, talk the talk, or like many have hopefully heard, to walk in beauty, and to speak in beauty, and to walk in beauty. Like it's not just something that comes out of you, you're not just talking with your ass, you're actually like, I don't know, cashing the checks your mouth runs, or whatever people say. Um, and it's very much a source of pride and a source of balance, not a source of um, weaponry or armor. Like for sure, absolutely tools, and like that's how we need to look at them, rather than it be sort of on guard. It's much more so like held with honor and held with pride, and not so much showmanship or brandishing. And that is the ways in which we walk authentically, peacefully, without the clout, without the need for validation, and without being held to circumstances around us, which is a lot easier said than done. But the ultimate thing, especially with this Nine of Cups, is like it builds this structure because there also is this central point. Um, and it is, versions of you come together, come collective. What is the ultimate truth that ties these things together? Um, it is your source essence, it is your source breath, it is your identity. And when you know yourself through and through, nobody can tell you who you are outside of you. And that's very much this relationship. Um, does that make sense? Does that ring a bell? It rings a bell for somebody. Ugh. What a stable structure that still leaves room for others, that still leaves room for filling, that still leaves room for, again, capacity. Uh, because I think if it was a 10, it would be something there. It's something that is upheld. It's something that um, doesn't need to be seen to be believed. And that's maybe the way you validate yourself, like what are your credentials? What are your this? What are your that? All of that shit is a weird Western system. None of it really matters. Most of the people that fucking did all of that cheated their way, paid their way through, had rich parents about it, or plagiarized, or something. And that's not to say there's not very intelligent people um, doing incredible and very useful, powerful things. But the system itself doesn't validate those things. Their work does, their research does, their work ethic does, uh, the things in which they've built on the foundations of their own mind and their own ethic. Party on, Boogeyman. Thank you. Love the compliments. Wish they came with a tip. The horrors of society. Well, that depends. That all depends. The horrors of society is a very real thing. But do the horrors of society dictate horror in your mind? Um, is the horrors of society what is responsible for your mental state? Because that is a very fragile, delicate balance. And I think very much, the ways in which we're all kind of imbibing on drama or knowledge or the internet and attention and whatever the heck uh, that validates our own experience rather than creating reality for ourselves. And again, much easier said than done, but I aim to spend my time in meditation, uh, creating heaven in a miserable world, creating peace in a miserable world, creating and exemplifying that in a very miserable world. It is very draining, but that is draining when that is your power source. It's like when you're plugged up to somebody else's outlet through an extension cord. So we reroute and figure out like what the power source is in here so that we can continue to. Because at the end of the day, I don't know, our ancestors have all been through fucking worse, and even we have done more with less. Uh, because we tapped into a different source of power than just what we see in the world around us, because we didn't define our justice uh, and our motivation and our uh, identity to assimilation. And that can be very, absolutely, exhausting to go against. But uh, when we rediscover and reapply that power source to something detached from the outside world, then we continue to be the kind of world that we want to see, in a world that is ignorantly destroying itself because it has not seen better, because it has not seen healing. It's also like a key component of like being able to get permission for assisted death. Is one of the first questions on the forum is like, have you seen anybody with your condition heal? And I think for the most part, people have given up hope. But nobody can really say that they haven't seen somebody heal, because we are still actively healing. That's a poor metric, and is very open-ended to conditions when we don't necessarily understand the nuance of multiple diagnoses, I suppose. Um, and so I think it is a wild goose chase. So I think it is a faulty system. So I think we are asking a system that was not designed to make us comfortable. We're asking it for comfort, and we ought to stop. Well, thank you. And I mean, in a very hopeful way, the world has been dark. The world has been fucked up in a lot of ways. But there's always been somebody willing to fight it. There's always been somebody willing to speak out about it. There's always been somebody willing to uh, actively participate in actions against. And that in and of itself should inspire you to like hold on to a peak, to a peak of a possibility. And again, if the worst case scenario is possible, then sure, yes, absolutely. But because that is true, so is the opposite true. So the best possible scenario also becomes equally possible. That's also honestly kind of how I deal with my anxiety. Is like, for sure, I like think of worst case scenarios, like, I don't know, garments getting caught in an escalator and like tearing me under. Um, but because of that, I'm very aware of myself and my surroundings, and I, don't have loose ends dangling. And like with events, like, sure, I'll think about fires and this and that, but it keeps us out of trouble. It keeps us grounded and aware, ultimately, because shit gets out of hand real quick. And a lot of the people that are really uncomfortable were like, oh, I never thought this could happen. Most of us were well past that. Most of us are like sitting drinking tea. Not most of us, but some of us are sitting drinking tea and like, told you so, without saying told you so, because we don't need to inflate an ego right now. We just need to level. You are very right. The best thing we can do is just make everyday efforts, because it's a very saturated system. Um, but again, this is actually a really good example. Everything is tied to something fucked, right? Uh, Most banks or credit unions even are tied to, if not directly, warfare and bombs, or planes, and fighter jets, to nuclear warfare, to chemical warfare, to some other thing. I found a chart online actually. Um, God, I went, that's in my files somewhere. And it was actually really devastating, because I was looking into what banks I could divest from, and it was like, oh, they own everything. And uh, real estate is definitely owned by people that we don't agree with, but at the end of the day, you're going to need a house or what have you, and that's probably not information that's readily available. However, rather than be torn to pieces and pinned to the ground in inaction by the weight of all of those decisions, focus on the momentum of all the other decisions you're making, in ways that you're giving back, in ways that you're spending money actively, in ways that you're giving back in ways that aren't even associated with money. And sometimes that's just patience. Sometimes it's a thumbs up instead of a middle finger in road rage situations. Sometimes that's just like chuckling to yourself when somebody cuts you off, because they'll feel more ashamed by your laughter than if you had hollered at them. Um, and little things like that become like a constant reminder of who you are, what your intentions are, and will start to show up and compound and reflect more until eventually you're like, you find your perfect out, or you find, another situation, another way out, another uh, way of compounding the kind of success that you want. And the willingness to adjust in that way. And maybe that's, probably true for the people that decide to just like cancel all that shit and go off the grid and what have you. The window is always there. It is always appearing. It is just a matter of if you see it and if you will go through it. Because every decision we make can be a part of our action or inaction. Is it so obvious? So obvious. Okay, I'm gonna pull some numerical cards to add to this hilt. It's funny you say that actually, because I very much identify with uh like Ace of Swords characters. And it's very much like built off of not just intellectual knowledge, but emotional knowledge, and not just student or studious knowledge, but and not just theory, but practice, or vice versa, and emotional intelligence. So, in that way, we can't hyper intellectualize our growth and our endeavors and our actions, because that will dig us into a hole of inaction. Obviously, be introspective, but like there's a line that we dance in between. When you are too humble, it often turns into insecurity, and when you are too confident, it turns into nobody wants to fuck with you. And I very much think that that's kind of a reoccurring theme that I've been noticing lately, is like very much solar plexus issues, and that's lack of confidence on ourselves, but also like the ways in which I think the world sort of bats at our confidence as well. And it only does it because it's a system that has been built on hazing, and they're all sad little people, realistically. But that doesn't make it easy. That doesn't excuse it. However, they cannot be um, the judge and jury of it. Don't take advice from people that you don't respect. Don't take criticism really from people you don't respect either. But also, I always like soften those things in my head, and they're just like, what version of me in you went through whatever the fuck they did to be the twats that they are. And then I find some common ground and laugh about it, or take myself out of the situation. One or the other. All right. If you would like, because we better tap into the subtle energies of the Earth and the planets, to take 3 deep breaths with me. Take a deep breath in. exhale. Take a deep breath in. And exhale. Take a deep breath in. And exhale. That was interesting. You know how you can like feel like the pressure almost of the water? Like you can't really feel water, but when you like skid your hand across the top, like when you're in a pool or something, um, like you get a sense for the edge of it, and you sort of feel the way that it's capable of ebbing and flowing. I'm glad that was refreshing for you, my dear boogeyman. Um, Hop on over to my YouTube, and I've got tons of free meditations for just everyday use in walking and centering, or healing an aspect of your younger self or another self, or various other internal explorations. Um, but it was very ebbing and flowing, very much waves, but very much warm, and that's a lot of passion energy. That's a lot of root energy. That's a lot of fire energy. That's a lot of heartbreak. That's a lot of heavy feelings. I get waves of that when I um, read in really heavy situations. But also when there's a lot of like inspiration, just a lot of energy to be used. And that's very true about like the kinds of feelings that we have. Sure, they have their designations, but it is also just like charge, like just neutral energy in this like weird little room, and we direct it in whichever way it goes. So you do have the choice to like, yes, have all this fucking rage and all this fucking energy, and it honestly, it don't matter what it's about. Just like, sadness or depression. We don't get to be judge and jury about tragedy and trauma, and whether or not that person's had more or less trauma than me, and whether or not they're dealing or not dealing or whatever. We don't get to be the judge and jury about it because there is no metric for it. It is just like this chamber full of energy. We get to choose what we do with it. And that's what defines you ultimately. You can have anger issues, but it's a matter of what you do with it. If you're threatening people and breaking walls, problem. If you're channeling it into like woodwork and painting, beautiful. If you've got, like anger issues is a funny one because I channeled it into like physical sports and like contact sports for a long time, and like fighting and like martial arts, and now it's very, I mean, I still absolutely love martial arts more so than anything, and I still box, but um it ultimately was more beneficial to channel it into meditation, because I was still conditioning that energy in an aggressive way, um and I think though we do find flow state and focus, meditation rather than like boxing, helps the body calm its stimulus. And I think, I mean, it's something I've been digging into actually, is like a amygdala stimulation, and uh, mediation through meditation, because it has been an interesting and evolving organ. And obviously, we do have a plethora of aggression issues, and aggressive outburst issues and psychosis. And I don't mean spiritual psychosis. I mean, America's very much known for its shootings. That's not a hidden fact. Let's hope I don't get censored for that. TikTok likes to ban me. Um, but there's many reasons for that. Obviously, there's some research for specific aspects of it. Whether or not you are super aware of the plastics in the brain and general body and what have you. But lead in our stuff is a big thing. Lead in our water, lead in our pipes, lead in our food, lead in our clothes. Lead in the past generations that has directly affected the brain, directly affected aggression. And so I think meditation, because of the way it affects the amygdala, can actually help mitigate that issue. Um, there's microplastics in everything that seep off of like bottles of water or Tupperwares or what have you, that are also taking up much space of debris in the ocean. But I've read that accumulates in the body, um, so that we have like chunks of plastic like in our bloodstream, and read that we have like a small fist size of plastic accumulating in the brain. So protect your water sources and clean your water sources. That is something that I'm absolutely working on because I've got an idea. I'm just looking for the funding for it. But also not just my idea. Years of research and studies in science journals. Um, what was I saying? Creativity, emotion, output, extremes. Yeah, exactly. It directly affects the brain in that way, and that's also some people correlate that information that these plastics are reducing activity in the brain, and that honestly makes sense. Like plastic is not conductive. It would like dense out electrical capacity, and we are bioelectric organisms. Um, and I think that's like wildly deliberate. Like, what better way to dull out our natural electrical components than with the terrifying shit that they ingest in us, put in us, what have you. I travel a bit, but I have like air filters at home. I have a survival bottle so I can always drink water, but it's not crazy fucked up water and it's not shitty bottled water. I always have like tahine and sea salt on me because it makes water more easily digestible. Isn't the right terminology. Um, but if you put a little salt and you froth your water, uh, creates greater hydrogen bonds in the water, and I'm working on an experiment with it actually. And so the hydrogen cells in your body better absorb it because it's more acclimated to the natural state of you. The same thing is true with healing. When I was a piercer, that was 100% like what I would recommend for healing is like warm water and sea salt because it acclimates to the body temperature and the cells in the skin. And you'd be surprised how quickly you heal when your body has substances like it. Okay. Of the cards, Ten of Hearts was the bottom of the deck, which is lovely because we did say that about the Nine of Cups and the Ten being full. There is fullness, and then do you see how there's still this space for offering or the space to be filled? I feel like that's like when we give people ideas, it's not about following per se. It is about like liberating them to figure out how it works for them to like a good teacher teaches you how to apply information, not just regurgitate it. A good teacher teaches you how like facilitates like personal power, facilitates these personal experiences, um, where you can kind of see yourself clearly in that. It also makes me think of all the freaking hagstones that I found the other day and the ways in which we can see ourselves clearly and step into that new version, and effectively step through a portal and into a new version of ourselves, understanding the nine is truth, and mastery of what we've done so far, and the 10 as fullness and wholeness, and satisfaction in a world that begs for our discomfort and our consumption. exactly. Evolve or repeat. Evolve or repeat the cycle. That's very much what's going on. And I feel like Jupiter's just like behind Venus, like about to snap its neck, like it's saying exactly that, like evolve or repeat. Um, it's probably the most intense I've ever like had that relationship present itself to me. Um, which is interesting. I don't know. Is Venus into it? Black Moon Lilith is very present as well and not far, so um, maybe it can be consensually rough in a way that we can zen through as long as we stay true to our moments, which is so funny because even in that like context, in like a scening context, um, you ultimately still like you can't get too caught up. You have to stay very present and very aware so that the person that you're with remains safe and that you remain responsive to your bottom's signaling or coding in any way, shape, or form. Which is not just true of kink, but true of any form of intimacy. Eight of diamonds, queen of spades, ace of clubs. I love that this queen of spades is here because it very much aligns with this ace of swords. So if there's thought that we have separation between like where you are and what you want, this is not the case. Um, and I know that there's like logistics to situations that like or steps that need to be taken. However, um, we often procrastinate and hold ourselves back because we're like, ah, if only I had this, if only I had this. When in actuality, people have done very powerful things and started entire movements with less. I'm sure, again, we've done more with less. The people that we've come from, people that have inspired us, have done more with less. And that's not to make anybody feel bad. That is to just be more of an inspiration, more of a don't forget where you've come from and don't forget what you're capable of and don't forget what's possible. And that's true all around. Again, Queen of Swords thinks of all perspectives, is also very aware of them. I feel like it's also like the safety tech of shit. It's the person that's dotting all the I's, crossing all the T's, checking all the deadlines. Um, the organized nature of us. And Virgo season is coming up soon. So shout out to your Virgo lovers because they're very good at categorization. And that's not to say categorization is a desirable trait per se. Like they're very good at designing and organizing and um, categorizing and identifying even um, and like holding information even they're usually just very studious people. So all of this I do mean very complimentary. However, compartmentalization isn't necessarily the desirable trait. Compartmentalization I think actually drives us mad. And so with that, this ace of wands I think wants us to burn down boundaries so that information can synthesize, burn down borders so that there can be a collective intelligence, a collective thread. And that's very much the ways in which maybe we have like one version of ourselves, like our work version of ourselves and our home version of ourselves and the code switching that exists in between, rather than just an authentic self. I understand that code switching has its place in a lot of people's lives. However, party on. Just consider to yourself um, how that's influenced the trust that you build, and if that's the relationship that you want. And consider also the modes and methods of like when that changes and what that means. because your voice is a very powerful thing. However, is it being used with you or against you? And that's something that even I've considered in myself. Is I have a very like low decibel baritone voice. I love it. But it was not always the case, and I did get made fun of a lot for it. Um, and I had to grow into it really. Um, but also, I've noticed in myself in the past how I change my voice when I want to be more approachable or when I want to be more digestible to people. And I did not like it's not that there's anything wrong with that adjustment. I did not like why I was doing it or when I was doing it. And so I had to sort of adjust that metric in my mind of when these things were applicable, so that I was using my voice as a tool of power, not a tool of disempowerment. I wouldn't say that it didn't feel authentic. Um, I would say that I think all tonalities of the voice should be used in a way in which that it is projecting, not disempowering, and voicing, not disempowering. There's a difference between being silent to listen and being silent because you feel withheld. There's a difference between, like the idea of swallowing your tongue because you actually consider what you thought does not need to be said, or swallowing your tongue because it's a trauma response, um, or swallowing your tongue because it's a people pleasing response, which happens to the traumatized. Um, so it's not that it's inauthentic; it's very authentic. It's just not being used with you in mind. It's still very authentic to you, but it's being used by something else against you rather than being used by you with you in mind. Does that make sense? Is that clearer for you, dear? Thank you for the input because I want to be very clear. And I know that these can be taken a million kinds of ways, and these, everybody's going to hear something and it's going to resonate with them in some way or another. And I can't control that. Um, I can't control the ways in which people walk with it or act with it or justify it. But I can be as clear as possible in the midst of it because I know what it feels like now. And that's why I love when people ask questions too during readings, because too often do I get this feeling that people feel like they just have to sit there and be like talked at and then just be like, okay, thanks. Like, no, take notes, make a list, like write it down, record it, I don't know. But ask questions. If it doesn't make sense to you, then maybe there's a way in which that I can explain it better, because spirits and symbols present themselves to me in a way, and they will present to you in a way, and that synthesis also has something to say. Um, Absolutely, absolutely. Um, but also even like it often goes beyond the symbol. I think people are so conditioned to like relationship readings that they're like, who is that supposed to be? A version of you, a version of your past self or your future self. Like it's not always like there's a lover coming or whatever it is that people sell. Um, and so I'm very clear. I do my best to be very clear so that it's actually something to grow on and not something to just like entrance. I'm Eight of Diamonds. Eight of Diamonds is patient and steady but busy. I feel like it's when you're walking with somewhere to go or somewhere to be because you've got both hands full, and you need, like, there's no time to stop and smell the roses, because where are you gonna, you can't carry anything else. What are you gonna put something down? And that maybe is necessary. Maybe we're carrying a big load, and the thing is, I guess we're getting shut down. Maybe that's necessary. Maybe we're carrying a big load. Maybe the thing is we need to ask for help. But also, maybe, oh, I thought it was going to shut me down. Um, but the Eight of Diamonds, maybe it's true. Maybe we're carrying a big load. Both hands are full, and the thing is we need to ask for help. Maybe we're carrying a bunch of shenanigans, and we can actually afford to put something down, or to put something in its proper place, or to give something away, um, so that we can create space and create connection in that. Even like this letting go season isn't all about just like cutting off dead limbs and like letting them rot. Sometimes that is letting go of embarrassment, of shame, and of of fear in connection. And so you offer this thing as a gift so that somebody else can grow from it or resonate. And very much like I'm trying to do now. Multiple dimensions. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That is a great way to make decisions. It's a great way to find solace. I've 100% meditated on versions of myself, and like sat down for tea with that person and was like, how are you? And let them tell me, what it was like to make this decision that I pondered so deeply, and, still wonder if it was right or wrong or whatever. And let them tell me how they feel. And then I would ask another, have tea with a different version of me that made a different decision, and have them tell me what that was like, how they're feeling, how that went down for them, and kind of get to see and validate and verify like why it is I make the decisions that I do. Because the happiest version in that point was the version of me that made the decision that I did. And I think that's very true also of like bouts of mania or depression that we have, and a version of us that is also in the throes of it. And so we have these spikes in activity and don't necessarily know where they come from. And it is, in fact, because it's a version of you somewhere else that perhaps is going through a really great day, or perhaps is going through a really bad day. And in that, we can hold a little patience and stillness for ourselves, not destroy ourselves or beat ourselves up about it, and give ourselves the safe space that we require to be able to sift through that in a very balanced way. Um, so that it's not like, oh, fuck, why am I feeling so, I thought I was fine, da 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 da, came out of nowhere, I'm fucking crazy, blah, 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 blah. No, you're feeling very intensely across timelines. It's like, I forget the scientific term for it, but it's been studied a ton. Like the twin phenomena, and like non-local feeling or non-local like sensation. Um, and it's science can prove it. So cut yourself a little fucking slack and eat a fucking powdered donut and calm down. um, Thank you for hanging out. I'm glad you enjoyed. Please follow, check out my website. What up? And maybe I'll see you for another reading another time. I do full moon, new moons on YouTube, and occasionally here for shits and giggles. Until next time. Let's see what else. I think we would all do better to understand the full capacity of the self, of what it is that you hold and have to offer. Um, and I think a really great example of that is also just in our breath and the shortness of breath that we all have. Um, and so rather than quick chest ridden breaths or stressed shoulder ridden breaths, um, I urge you to imagine what it would be like to breathe in through your nostrils and allow breath to sweep up and over all of you, uh, so that you feel coolness like a fan in the back of your eyelids as well. And when you feel like it's reached the highest point that you can find at this moment, and you release the breath through the mouth, slowly, patiently, taking your time so that the length of this breath also reaches to the lowest point of your toes. Inhale again through the nose, carrying breath up and over you, over the crown, behind the eyelids. Finding the tallest point in your energy. And exhale, breathing out of your mouth. Stretching that breath warm and long around you like a blanket and underneath the toes. Inhale through the nose and consider allowing this breath to wash over every inch of you and through every corner and every wrinkle and every crease. And the coolness with which we inhale, but the warmth with which we patiently and slowly and steadily exhale, that then wraps around us like a warm blanket after a rainy day. Allow this breath to serve as a purifier, as a regenerator, as a slick energy comb gently through the energetic web that weaves itself around you, so that you can find yourself clear-headed and balanced and sure of what it is that you aim to be. Always striving to be more balanced. With that, follow your breath. And I will see you another time. Much love.